Welcome back to my channel. Today, we'll be discussing a gorgeous convenience store clerk's Twisted Love by Takashi Aosada. If you haven't already, click the subscribe button now and get your BL Library card for the BL Library. Before we get started, there will be spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled on this manga, go and click off now. No worries, I'll catch you next time. For those of you left behind, let's go over some content warnings. There may be references to age gap, power imbalance, overwork, stalking, obsession, child abandonment, child neglect, unsanitary living, mentions of sex work, excessive drinking, dubcon, knowledge gap, mentions of cheating, not between the main couple, and breakups as these things do appear in the manga. But if that's all good with you, let's go and get started. Itsuki is an overworked salaryman. He works for the pharmaceutical industry, and after traveling from pharmacy to pharmacy, meeting with pharmacists, and making emergency deliveries, by the time he gets off, he's worn out and smelling like a doctor's office. The main thing he looks forward to on his way home from work is buying some cat food from his local convenience store and feeding the stray cats. A bonus, though, is seeing the attractive convenience store cashier. He's a beautiful man, but a young adult far out of his league, so he simply enjoys looking at him from afar. That is until the cashier happens to be outside feeding the cats before Itsuki can get around to it. Itsuki is surprised, but once again is stunned by the cashier's beauty. But Itsuki is a bit thrown off when the cashier uses his name. Then, the cashier, Fumio, gives Itsuki his medical card back, claiming Itsuki dropped it when pulling his card out. Relieved, Itsuki decides to take this opportunity to grow closer to Fumio, and day by day, as they interact, they do until Itsuki finally gets a chance to ask him out for dinner. Over dinner, Fumio and Itsuki talk. All the while, Fumio drops strange hints regarding how Itsuki lives and the precautions he should take, as if Fumio knows more about him than he should. But that's not possible. Fumio's just a good and thoughtful young man, while Itsuki is the older pervert, right? To start with, the cover art really drew me in on this one. It looked very unique with wide expressive features, and I was interested to see how those appeared within the work itself. Unfortunately, it is much more inconsistent than I was anticipating. There are very lovely panels thanks to those expressive features, but there are many panels where those same features make the characters appear more frog-like than I would prefer. Fumio is probably the most inconsistent, which is unfortunate since he is also the most beautiful. Itsuki, while more consistent, is much plainer looking. That isn't necessarily bad, but I wish Fumio was just as consistent as Itsuki. Overall, it's fine, but it's certainly not the prettiest or the most consistent title I've ever read. Now, something I haven't read in a while is a good old stalker and victim romance, which this very lightly touches upon. While it isn't as overtly stalker-esque as some other titles, and the stalker becomes a lover almost instantly after being discovered, it is still a stalker romance. I actually really like that it doesn't spend a ton of time dwelling on how Fumio figures out where Itsuki lives, where he keeps his spare key, and his living arrangements in general. How it gets the stalker aspect through is much more subtle, foreshadowing it with Fumio dropping hints about knowing all these things through their brief interactions. We do see him going to Itsuki's house, but that's really all we see, and I think for the length of this work, that is plenty to establish how obsessive Fumio is without taking up too much time in the one-shot. Part of me wants a longer series to see more of that obsession, but considering the length, this is just right. It establishes just how obsessive Fumio is, but leaves enough room to develop other aspects of the story. Another bit of foreshadowing we get is on Fumio's background. It's a really nice touch that Fumio eats like he's starving, with a very awkward way of holding utensils and little to no table manners. It's a very easy way of showing how little raising he had and how his life might have been based more on desperation and survival over everything else. It's mentioned very briefly in the story that Fumio was abandoned or neglected by his parents. This is a very short one-shot, so it tries its best to establish a lot of background quickly. It relies heavily on hinting before outright saying it, which gives us a good foundation before the reveal. However, we don't get much more about it. The stalking and Fumio's background are important for the story, but they aren't explored beyond the reveals, which is a missed opportunity and stunts Fumio as a character. Instead, the main focus isn't on Fumio's sad past. Fumio's painful past and tough living conditions exist to grow Itsuki, which I don't like. Itsuki takes Fumio into his home because he feels bad that Fumio is living in squalor. Itsuki says he thinks he loves Fumio only because of the sexual chemistry they have, which he discovers is thanks in part to Fumio's past as a sex worker. There are times when Itsuki admits that he likes Fumio because Fumio's life has been so opposite to his. He's more curious about Fumio or guilty over Fumio than anything. As a result, the relationship never ends up feeling like real love to me. Itsuki wants to care for Fumio, while Fumio truly loves Itsuki. At least that's the feeling I get. It just doesn't feel very successful on the romance front. Instead, it feels like the story of a privileged guy realizing how much privilege he has and wanting to essentially raise a lover, which isn't my favorite thing in the world. With all that being said, this has so many elements that should make it a favorite for me. I love older bottoms, I love opposites attract, and I love a good obsessive lover. However, the focus is entirely on Itsuki and how he feels bad for Fumio, which is the basis for the romance. It just makes it all feel lacking by the end. I would have loved some growth for Fumio too, but there just isn't any. He appears to be trying to learn to cook and clean, but that's the extent of it, which was just disappointing. In the end, I think this is alright, but not much better than that. So, have you read Convenience Store Clerk's Twisted Love? If so, what do you think? Do you agree with my assessment? Do you not? Let me know in comment below. Otherwise, I'll catch you next time. Bye!